Hey, this is Paul and Scott, and today we're going to talk about how we have our hundreds of dragon fruit varieties survive during the cold weather in Southern California. So here's 10 tips about what I recommend for dragon fruit to survive and do well and thrive in colder weather. So number one, it starts with your soil. So soil health. And you can see here, this is a compost-free potting soil. And I've interviewed quite a few farmers, or Scott and I both have, and we've learned over the years that compost-free potting soil has better results with dragon fruit, especially using sand and peat moss. So these are probably my most primary ingredients that I recommend is sand, number one. This all-purpose sand, I get it at Home Depot. And just make sure it says it's safe for potting soil. And then number two is, this is a really easy mix. This is Sunshine Mix number 4. It's similar to peat moss. I mean, the main ingredient is peat moss, but it has mycorrhizae, wetting agents, perlite as well. So stick to these types of products. They're gonna have a long-lasting potting soil, much better results than using something like this. After about 3 seasons, this is about over half of its compost, ground up trees. So I started using things like this, but over the years, even amending it, it gave us problems. So switching to these and having healthy soil, I mean, look, we have some beautiful winter fruit here. This is Sayarong's Orange Dragon, a really sensitive Megalanthus hybrid. And this fruit's been on here since October. So over 3 months, it's slowly ripening and the plant is overall healthy. This one does get a bit of rust, which is expected in our colder weather. But I mean, look, it's got beautiful new growth right here and nice dark green branches, even in the cold weather. So these plants think it's spring still. It's been a rather mild winter so far, although you wouldn't believe that these plants were in the 20s about a week ago, 6 days ago. So we got down to 29 degrees and then we had 3 frost episodes this week. And you can see these plants are just fine. So that's the number one tip, is having healthy compost-free potting soil. And one of the farms, I think their quote was that they don't consider themselves dragon fruit farmers, they consider themselves soil farmers. And I thought that was a really interesting way to look at it. Okay, the second tip, most important, is the timing of your fertilizer. So this is actually the award-winning American Beauty here. This is the plant that, if you've hopefully seen our video where we sent Weird Explorer a bunch of fruit, this plant produced the winning fruit, the American Beauty. And what I did is I timed the fertilizer and I fertilize it with a nitrogen-rich fertilizer. You can actually just top dress with Fox Farms, but I used blood meal. And I timed that in the early to mid-fall. And then I top dress it heavily and I fertilize it. And I also use Grow Power Plus. And you can see there's a little bit of rust, but overall, healthy plants, really old plants as you can see here. And I timed that fertilizer just right. What you don't want to do is use an all-purpose fertilizer in the middle of winter. You actually want to fertilize these plants and have them recover during that fall to winter transition. And some of the best products we recommend, and I actually use Grow Power Plus. I used it on this mango tree. You can see how healthy it is. It's actually got growth right after this frost. So
how big was that when you got it?
This one is actually Leo seedling, and it was about here when I planted it.
That's only been like, what, a year?
It's been in the soil here for about 6 months, 5 months.
Oh, not even that.
And it's just doing really great. It's thriving. And I really believe that the main reason why is thanks to Dan, Scott's father-in-law, is this Grow Power Plus. And I know that the owners tragically passed away unexpectedly, and now you can't find it. I mean, it's in stores, but they're not producing it anymore. I do hear that they're gonna produce something very similar in the future, but regardless, I've asked a lot of people that know a lot more than me about ingredients and fertilizers, and they all come back to 2 things. They first think it's the humic acid, which you can buy granular humic acids for a fair price. It's pretty cheap. So they truly believe the key ingredients to this product that we can make our own is going to be using humic acid and then the soil penetrant, which we already know is gypsum.
So you don't have any updates on what's going on with the Grow Power business?
No, I know that people are still finding it in stores. And last I heard from my local supplier is they know a lot more than me, and they discovered that supposedly they're going to make the same type of product, but without the soil penetrant, which would be without the gypsum.
Okay.
So that's where we're at, tragically, but I did buy a surplus. I have a whole nother season's worth of this product, and I truly believe that this has been the game changer. I mean, hopefully you've seen our other video where we talked about this and talked to Dan, and I'm proud to say a year later, my plants will look a lot healthier just like Dan's. I mean, Scott, did you use any Grow Power on your plants?
Yeah, I put Grow Power on
At your
this.
house?
Yeah, yeah.
And did you notice a darker green, healthier?
I think they look better, definitely.
They do look better?
I mean, I don't know. I haven't talked to Dan about what he's going to do about a replacement, but I'm sure he's thinking about it too. So we'll have to ask him. But maybe he has some updates on Grow Power or whatever he's going to substitute for that.
Yeah, so I have a season to figure it out, but I really truly believe again that using humic acids, gypsum, which I don't have here right now, and worm castings would probably be really close as a second.
You might have to end up making your own. That's
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah. So regardless, the timing of your fertilizer, I used quite a bit of this, and you can see it's a nitrogen-rich fertilizer. So the NPK here, that's key, is having a high nitrogen value, 5, and then P, which is going to be potassium, and phosphorus, right? So you could almost have like a blood meal would be just a first number would be high in nitrogen. So blood meal or this would work really well. Again, time it right in the fall. I don't recommend, I'm not fertilizing any of my plants in the dead of winter, and I'm not going to fertilize them again until the spring. So probably about April is when they'll get fertilized next. So timing and the quality of your fertilizer components are going to result in really healthy dragon fruit, as you can see. All right, tip number 3, and that is know your microclimate. I'm in zone 9B, and this part of our yard is the warmest part of the yard. You can see I have a blue Java banana. We have the Princess of the Night with the fruit here. We have the Lost Dutchman with the fruit here as well, still in the dead of winter. Bit of rust there, as you can see, but we'll talk about that later. And then you can see I have some other really strange epiphyllums and epiphytes and things that I don't even know what some of them are, but they're very sensitive and they're really, really healthy here. And if you believe it or not, it's been 29 degrees to 116 degrees on our property here in the past few years during growing our dragon fruit here. So they've tolerated that huge range. But again, some of these varieties would die in a different part of the yard. This microclimate, what's so special about it is you can see I have a Hoang Red here as well, one of our Assunta seedlings, a Frankie's Red hybrid crossed with Assunta, given to me by my friend Richard Renshaw, and then this really old Frankie's Red, which is really, really old. It's even got new growth, but this is actually the warmest part of our yard. And the reason why is this little microclimate is about 6 degrees warmer because all the cold air slowly sinks down the hill. So every night as it gets really cold, slowly this air moves. And so this perfect spot, this is the perfect spot where I put all of my most sensitive plants here. And you can see I have even some rare other plants here, and they're all thriving. Here's some of our really sensitive ones like Trinidad and Red Leonardo that can't take so much sun. And so again, this is just the perfect spot. And so I can get by about 5 to 7 degrees in just this spot alone of warmer weather. So know your microclimate and know your zone. All right, let's move on to tip number 4. It's going to be about knowing the age of your plant. As you can see here, this Frankie's Red is really, really old. I believe it's almost, 18 years old, 17 years old. Came in 2006. So really old Frankie's Red. And you can see it's doing fine out here, but let's go see what we do with our really young cuttings. Let's go check it out. Okay, tip number 4, the biggest factor, the age of your plant. So look at this Connie G 1-2. You can see it's a young cutting. I've been trying to root it here in our greenhouse during the winter. No luck, but if I left this outside, it probably would die. So unrooted cuttings, you absolutely need to bring them inside and protect them. This is an unheated greenhouse. We'll get from 40 to 100 degrees in here. Yesterday I came in here, it was 95 degrees. So I also recommend unrooted cuttings to keep them safe and protected from the frost, and then anything that you just transplanted. This is Gray Martin's 1355. I rooted it and I just transplanted it out of a 1 gallon, so I brought it in here to keep it safe because honestly you don't really want to transplant dragon fruit during the winter season in Southern California, especially if they're dormant. If you are going to choose to do it like I do, I don't recommend doing it, is be really careful. Just repot it without damaging any of the roots fruits and you can get away with it. You can see on this side I'm actually having some problems with too much sun, so I put up some extra burlap here, and you can see I'm also protecting all of my seedlings. Now I'll put these outside later to evaluate them, but the first 2 years of growing my seedlings, I like to protect them inside the greenhouse during the winter. So I have some that are a year older, and I left them out on purpose to see how they react to the cold. So age of your cutting, and you can see we have lots of different other plants here, really matters. I even had to bring in my variegated pepper here. It's not dragon fruit, but it's really cool looking because I knew something like this would die in the frost. So age of your plants, really mature plants, you can leave them outside and they're a lot more cold tolerant than something that's really young or that's just starting to root. Okay, tip number 5 is trellis design. There are so many ways that you can trellis a dragon fruit to support it. Hopefully you've seen how we do it. I like to stuff a concrete and use rebars and make a really stout trellis that's into the ground. And I don't ever have to think about it. We had some strong winds, and you could see these hybrids here, this Trisha seedling I grew and a physical graffiti seedling I'm growing out to evaluate. You can see the branches, I haven't really pruned them, and they're fine. I mean, there's even new growth here. So during our cold weather, you can see these plants are really happy and healthy, but this trellis is designed such that I have really good drainage. In fact, I've drilled extra holes in all these pots so the drainage comes out. And then again, I'm using a compost-free potting soil. So you can see a stout trellis like this really matters, especially if I need to cover it with a blanket or something, a frost blanket or something like that, which is another tip I'll show you soon. Versus maybe a trellis if you have a design like this along a fence. Well, this is another good design, but again, how you set it up. This one's not as stout, I would say. And you can see a branch like this in a strong wind might break. So really how you set up your dragons, I definitely needed to tie this one up a bit. And as you can see, and same with some of these, really matter. So set up your trellis wisely. In my personal opinion, these are nice along the fence, but if I were to have all the money in the world, I would build these for every variety because I can literally stick in a plant, a dragon fruit, into this setup and forget about it. I'm never worrying about the wind or them falling over. They're extremely stout.
Yeah, we have a video on how to make these trellises.
Oh yeah, we have a few videos. So
we'll put a link in the description.
We'll put a link. I really like it if you're into something permanent, but here's another point is maybe you live somewhere cold where you have to bring in your dragons like New York. Well, maybe make sure that you have a mobile dragon fruit trellis.
Yeah, something on wheels.
Yeah, so they make them, they're expensive. I've seen them a few $100s online. I haven't tried one myself, but I'm sure you could even go to Home Depot and kind of come up with your own design that's mobile. So really just think ahead about your trellis depending on the type of cold weather you have in your climate. All right, on to tip 6, and it's right here. It's the Planket. Hopefully you've seen our video on it from last season or the season before. And I've really enjoyed it. This is the same one that I've been using for 3 years now, 2 years. And with trellis design, as you can see, it's really easy to just plop it on, and I could continue and put it over this whole plant by myself rather easily. But what I like about this Planket is now you can see I'm making a giant pile of different varieties. I have mango trees in here. I have really unique passion fruit, Adamoya hybrids, all sorts of things that I had to protect from the frost. And so what I did this week is I just wrapped this up like a burrito. And this Planket is the larger size, but it's protecting all of our plants, our trees. And what I did is I just kind of wrapped it up like this by myself. And luckily it wasn't too windy. I used some clips as well. And I just protected all of these unique plants and hybrids and seedlings just to keep some added protection.
You get a little more bang for your buck. You got like 30 plants in there.
Yep. So when you have this scale of plants, you can see I leave all of these trellises alone, but maybe I had like a really special plant I wanted to protect or something, I would go with using this Planket.
Plus the smaller ones are probably gonna be a little more sensitive.
Yep.
And less established.
So just doing this, you can see everything in there has been safe so far. No damage that I've seen, a lot of new growth. So really happy so far with using the Planket. All right, on to tip number 7. It actually sounds a little counterintuitive, but you can see by the health of this Asunta 2 from Elk Creek that it actually really worked. And what I did is I wet the soil before our frost. So I turned on our drip irrigation, and we had some rain too this week, which helped, but actually letting all of the pots get some nice moisture into them and having wet potting soil, that will actually be beneficial during a cold spell. So it will buy you a few degrees. I know that sounds weird. You don't want to water the plant material, but the soil. Having moist or wet soil will definitely help making your plants more cold tolerant. So try that. Unless you're using compost, you're going to need to cover it and you want to keep your soil dry, but that's also going to decrease your resistance to cold, if that makes sense. So again, we're back to that number one tip, is having the right soil, because you're able, at least we are able, you can see I watered all these dragons here, and actually the only frost damage I could find is, I found a little bit, you can see some right here, Scott. So look, this is a Asunta 2 seedling, which is a seedling off of the first plant I showed you. This is a daughter, and you can see that's frost damage here. So 6 days later, that's what the new growth happens to look like. But again, you can see every other plant. Oh, there's a little damage here too. See?
Yeah, I think your plants look healthier this year than last year.
They're the healthiest they've ever looked.
Yeah.
And again, I watered them really well before when we dipped into 29 degrees. And again, that's just for a short duration. We're not sitting here in our climate at 29 degrees all day. These plants are exposed to those temperatures for just a few hours.
Yeah.
So, luckily, until the sun rises. So again, moist soil, that's really gonna help make your plants more cold tolerant. Okay, tip number 8 is gonna be remove some fruit. And what I mean by that, some, is certain varieties here. In this case, Caslau, a Costa Ricensis variety, you can see what happens. These plants are a little more susceptible to cold in my experience, and they'll split like this Caslau. And so now these ants are enjoying this fruit. I could probably eat it, it's not gonna taste good.
Yeah,
So,
if you were on a desert island. And
oh yeah, if I was starving, I would eat this thing. But generally, I actually cut them earlier in the season before. So when they start to get rust, I'll show you one in a minute. I'll show you one that we're gonna cut. But what I mean by some is this Costa Ricensis DNA, it's gonna split and not gonna be a good fruit. Guatemalans and especially Megalanthus hybrids like the Cyarongs you saw earlier are gonna taste good all season long. In fact, Israel calls them winter crops. So like Diego's Desert King seedling over here, you do not want to remove the fruit because you're gonna have beautiful, delicious fruit that's gonna be ripe in March or April. So you can see this type of fruit, it's really healthy, much different appearance, and this one's gonna be a delicious fruit in about 2 more months.
Yeah, that was a long time on the vine, huh?
Yeah, some of them you just gotta wait. I think, what was it, 6 months, 8 months, or something like that last year it took before it was ripe, but it was absolutely delicious. One of my favorite Megalanthus hybrids. And you can see this plant's really healthy overall anyways.
Yeah, it looks really nice.
It's got nice new growth. It's got new branches even here after the frost. Look at that. I thought these would have burned off or died. Nope. This thing is just tolerating the cold. It's in a really happy spot here. Partial sun, I've learned. So again, certain fruit you want to remove. Ones like this, absolutely do not remove it because you're going to have a delicious fruit in the spring. All right, tip number 9 is going to be winter pruning. And you can see here, we had to show you this fruit. This is one what I mean by cutting it off. This is San Ignacio. This fruit's not going to taste good no matter what. And you can see it looks like Rocky Balboa after a fight. I mean, look at that thing.
You could give your kids that in their
Adrian.
stocking when they're back for Christmas.
Yeah, I guess this could be like a lump of coal. You get this. So we prune those off, but you can see I'm actually spraying my cleaner after every cut. And that's because, remember, that just about all the plants in California, when they tested them, and something like 80%, 90% had cactus virus X. So it's a really good habit to always clean your pruning shear. You can see I use 90% rubbing alcohol in this hand
Dr.
sanitizer.
Bronner's?
Oh no, I actually just fill it with pure rubbing alcohol.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used the bottle,
Got
so
it.
I recycled it. So 90% rubbing alcohol, and what I mean is I cut from different variety. There's 2 varieties here, so I'll cut and only cut the same variety, and then I'll clean it before moving on to another variety. So that's a little, don't forget, a little FYI. And going back to the topic here, tip number 9 is pruning back during the winter. You could see that this is damaged here from the frost. This is Connie Meyer. And so what I like to do is I'll just cut off the tips a little bit. And in this case, I'll probably remove this whole branch because there's a bit of rust, a bit of cold damage, and the plant's gonna respond, and that's okay. So in this case, I'm just gonna remove all of these. This is one of the few plants. I think I had 3 that got some frost damage, and this is one of them. So it shows you Connie Meyer is probably one of the most sensitive varieties in our collection of all the dragons. So I'll prune off that young growth that has the rust, any cactus rust you can see here. And in the case of this really long branch, I'm just gonna cut it here, just like Danny taught us, at a 45-degree angle, so that way the water won't hit here and cause any rot. And you only want to prune when you're forecasted to have clear weather. Don't do this right before rain. You want this to heal. And in fact, you can actually use rubbing alcohol, which is one thing I'll use, or I prefer to use hydrogen peroxide, and I'll give it a little spray right on the wound, and that will really help. So remember, tip number 9, prune back your dragon fruit. And you don't want to prune them back too much. You just want to prune them back just enough to kind of clean up that damage, and if you have a bit of rust or some pathogens, clean that off. So you can see I can tend to go through these, and if they have really ugly looking branches, I prune them off. Okay, the final tip, tip number 10, is dealing with cactus rust. So there's actually different pathogens here. I probably see 2 on this plant, and I don't know how to say the names, but this is really common in our cold climate, especially if we get a lot of moisture that sits there. So this is one of Don Burnett's hybrid. This is Connie G and Queen Denarius' sister. This is seedling 1-12. And much like its mother, Connie Meyer, which we just saw get a little damage to the cold, this one doesn't have that frost damage. Luckily, it's more resilient than its mother plant, but it does get quite a bit of rust. In fact, you can see here, its seedling sister here is Connie G. Connie G has gotten quite a bit of rust here this season, but I'm just leaving the branches there because I want some fruit. So I don't care, it's not gonna be pretty. I know that in time, this is gonna heal, and in fact, it's starting to heal right there. So how do you treat this? Well, a lot of people use copper fungicide. You can also use neem oil to treat this. As you can see, I actually don't do much of anything, except for I have one new thing I'm gonna show you. I haven't tried it yet. I've just actually foliar sprayed my first plant, but I learned from a really cool farm that closed down, they swear by using, to deal with cactus rust, instead of using chemicals, they use this special type of seaweed powder. And it can't just be any type of seaweed. They told me I needed to find this one. It's called Norwegian sea kelp. I can't read that fancy name, but that's what they told me to find. That's the scientific name for the Norwegian seed kelp. And this is what they use as a foliar spray on their plants to treat rust. And they swear by it. So an organic farm that just sells to Whole Foods, they don't want their name disclosed, but they told me this tip last season. And so I found some, I bought it, and I just treated my first plant. And give us a like and a subscribe and follow our channel, and I'll let you know how this goes.
What do you dilute that to?
I just follow the directions, and it's really strong. So I just put a tiny, like a teaspoon or 2 into a spray bottle, and I did it at a small scale.
So that bag will last a long time.
Oh, it's gonna last forever.
Yeah.
And I actually add this as a top dressing to my fertilizer just to see, because you can see it's really high for bud and bloom. So you could actually use this a twofold. You could add this into your fertilizing regimen during the summer to enhance the bloom, because the last number is high. So I'm really excited. Again, it can't be any sea kelp. They swear it has to be this specific one, a Norwegian sea kelp. So there you go. There's our 10 tips to keep your dragon fruit plants happy and healthy. As you can see, it's been a journey, and we're in year 5 now, I think, Scott. And you can see our plants are healthier than ever. So give us a like, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Take care.